quantify impact is fairly simple. What's the carbon budget for 1.5 or 2 degree and how do we get there? I think on a qualitative level, there's a lot of things that I would like for my daughters to be able to experience. I'll give you one example. I'm a scuba diver. Most coral reefs in the world will be dead by 2050. And that's even the case in a 1.5 degree scenario. So I would like my daughters to live in a world where they can at least experience some of what I experience right now. I really, really want to help making this world a place in which it's worth living in the future. So how would I explain Terralytiq to a 5-year-old? I think I would say that we help other companies that create a lot of things, goods, products made out of a lot of other things, to better understand how the things that they buy affect the environment and how to reduce their impact. We are not trying to be 100% correct, and we're also not trying to get to the answer by collecting a lot of data, which is what a lot of our peers do. Instead, we use sort of our understanding and knowledge of those value chains to come up with a very, very, very good day one answer. And then over time, as you, as our customer, manage to collect more and more data, if you manage to collect more and more data, it just makes this answer tiny bit better, but it's not necessarily needed. And that's quite unique out there, so we haven't seen this anywhere else. What inspired me to start Terralytiq? I should say us, my co-founder and I. I think both of us, we realized when we were working in our previous job that a lot of companies struggle with their supply chain emissions. So they really have a hard time figuring out where do we affect the environment, where do we emit, how do we emit, etc. At the same time, for those companies, the supply chain emissions make up a huge part of their footprint. So it just felt sort of a very big discrepancy between like how important is it and how are companies dealing with it today. And there were no other good solutions out there. So we felt, there was a gap in the market and we had a way to fill it, and we left and wanted to do it. What is a supply chain and why does it affect climate? So we're focusing on companies that build physical goods, physical products. It would be automotive, it would be air conditions, it would be refrigerators, and so on and so on. Now, if you break it down, all of those things that I just mentioned are made of these materials. So steel, aluminum, copper, brass, and so on. These materials, as they're produced, cause a lot of emissions. Depending on how you count it, depending where you look, could be up to 9 billion tons of CO2. So whether you get your aluminum from China or from Norway can make a difference of like 6, 7, 8 times, just because aluminum uses a lot of electricity as it's produced, and China uses a lot of coal in their electricity, and Norway a lot of water power, makes a huge difference in the aluminum. Where it comes from and how it's produced makes a huge difference. And our solution basically helps companies better understand very little data, how the supply chain looks like. We can predict what is your footprint likely going to look like. And then once you know that, we can then match it with solutions saying like, well, likely the smelted aluminum from your aluminum supplier comes from China. So if you were to switch that to Norway, or if you were to ask that supplier in China to switch from grid to renewable electricity, that would reduce your carbon footprint significantly. So that's the type of work we do for our customers. What do I hope that my customers experience when using Terralytiq? My big hope is that they get back time. A lot of companies have a big ambition to decarbonize, but they're really stuck in this collecting more and more data, trying to make sense of that, going back to suppliers. And it's really all about data collection, which leaves very, very little space and time for actually working on solutions. What I really want for my customers to experience is that when they use our platform, it makes this data collection and the identification of things they could do so easy that they can focus their time on actually doing it and implementing it and getting that carbon emissions baseline down. What are some of the challenges that we see when we identify our customers? A big one is that companies are in very, very different stages of their sort of sustainability or decarbonization journey. So you have some companies that have really just started to create transparency, and where it's all around like create the skill set, collect the data, get a better insight. Then you have others that are a step further and that actually are looking into solutions and are saying, okay, what can we do to reduce that? And then there's yet others that are sort of at the stage where they have their initiatives, where they have their pathway, and they're now trying to implement it. And then, of course, the supply chain. I mean, we go into the supply chain. We help companies work with their suppliers. And the suppliers often have no idea about the sustainability aspect of their product. You have some suppliers that are a bit further, that can give you a product carbon footprint or a life cycle analysis. And then you have others that are at the very beginning, to whom you basically have to explain everything from the beginning. And automating this in one product, in one journey, is a really big design challenge. So we are really focusing on certain aspects of the journey and are trying to make those aspects really good. And that's at the moment still the data collection, so that very early stage. We're trying to help those companies be better and make that part easier, right? So I guess like going for intuition, not trying to serve the experts, but really make it super simple and super easy to answer. That's the biggest way that this affects our strategy in design. And I think the best way to describe it is intuition and automation. So we want to really make this a sort of an automated process. So one of the very, very early founding themes of Terralytiq was that we want to keep this a pure software as a service company, not with services and consulting, because we want this to be scalable. So we want this to be immediately scalable across hundreds of thousands of companies to reach many, many of those suppliers. So when I'm thinking of design, I'm thinking of design on our platform that makes it very intuitive to use the platform, so that there's no hand-holding from customer success needed, that there's no consulting needed, there's maybe not even a lot of documentation needed, but just you log in and you find it very intuitive to use and then just do it. And I think it sounds easier than it is. I think from a design perspective, because there is so many different stages in which a customer or supplier could be, it's quite a challenge. But yeah, we're trying to go for it, and so far it's looking good. On the supplier side, I think one big challenge was that we expect the suppliers to provide certain data. For example, for a product, how much electricity was used to produce this particular product. And many suppliers, they don't know how to actually get to that information. Most suppliers are like, okay, I can't do this, or I don't want to do this, or whatever. So we had to find a way to make it super easy for them to actually provide the answers we need from them. So we solved this also by these little hover icons and like additional documentation, step-by-step guides. And the feedback we got was it's very easy to use. But I think it remains a challenge to do this for every single new release of feature, to keep this really simple and intuitive. How do we determine Terralytic's social and environmental impact? When you look at our platform, we have multiple customers on our platform, and they will upload their procurement data, which you can translate into carbon footprint. So once we start having more and more customers, we can probably just take the carbon footprint across all of them, and we can get to a metric called emissions under management. So basically how we want to measure is, how much emissions do we have under management? So people actively working on reducing that on our platform. And then for how much of that have we identified initiatives? So at some point we'll be able to sort of build a flow from like, this is how much we have looked at, here's how much we have identified initiatives, here's how much of that is currently under implementation, and here's how much we have actually reduced carbon impact. And that's really something that we want to go to, and I'm looking forward to that. If I had a magic wand and I could just make one wish come true, I mean, from a Terralytiq perspective, that's an easy question, because it would be to be at net zero before we burn through our 1.5 degree budget, preferably even earlier, even though that's very unrealistic, but hey, we're talking magic wands, so net zero, and then we can focus on helping companies protect their value chains from physical impacts of the climate change that unfortunately we all caused over the past 200 years. Working on climate is also around like not making sure that my daughters live in a nice world, but that everyone who's currently in their home country trying to make a living for themselves and their family actually has an opportunity to do that in the future.
The transition to climate positive technologies hinges on whether we can get enough people to feel connected to this forward movement. And we're very optimistic about when the highly emotional sensory discipline of design joins forces with the technical know-how of each of these innovations.
Absolutely.